Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
You are listening to the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz on 1230 WBZT. Well, when it comes to questions of silver, of the CFTC and Bart Chilton, Bitcoin, foreign exchange manipulation, and the Fed, who do you talk to but Bix Weir and the roadtorooted.com. Bix, welcome back to the Financial Survival Network.
Thank you, Kerry. It's great to be here, and there's so much to talk about these days. I'm glad we're getting together.
Hey, so Bitcoin, 3-4 months ago, it was a bubble. It had been deflated. It was dead. Now it's 350 the last time I looked at it, and it looks like it's Bitcoin to infinity, right?
It is an amazing concept, having another alternative to the fiat monetary system besides gold and silver. I advocate owning some Bitcoin, but I do see there will be a bubble in Bitcoin. It's not a bubble yet because there's not enough users. But just think about what happens when there is a bubble. The first people who got in are pretty savvy on why they got in because, the Fed is destroying the system. So they're getting into Bitcoin. They'll understand that Bitcoin is, it's still just another electronic blip. And the next alternative to that is silver and gold, physical. So can you imagine if Bitcoin goes to $100,000 a coin or $1 million a coin, as some people are, suggesting? What are those multi-billionaires, multi-trillionaires going to do to preserve their wealth? They're going to go out and buy physical silver and gold. And the reason Bitcoin is going up, and it's a good reason, is that it's not manipulated like gold and silver. Gold and silver should be doing what Bitcoin is doing. Right now, Bitcoin's over $400 a coin. But all that money, it should be going into gold and silver. But because they're rigged lower, nobody's excited about gold and silver. They're looking for the next best thing, and that is Bitcoin, which is very difficult to manipulate on the long term. And the users of Bitcoin and people who own Bitcoin, they had their bubble popped where it went from $250 a coin down to $50 a coin. But now they've learned to stay in. Some of them sold out, but now they're getting all back in. So it'll be interesting, that's for sure.
That's for sure. I mean, over $400. I could have bought it at $7. That's the one I'll be telling my grandchildren. I remember when I could have bought Bitcoin at $7, right?
You're going to be saying that. You're going to be saying that when it hits $5,000 too. So you're get used to saying it until this system blows up. Any decent alternative besides the fiat money system is good.
Hey, speaking of the system blowing up, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Actually about a month and a half ago, about the new $100 bills coming out. I know it wasn't on our list of things to talk about, but they kind of look like euros, the way that 100 is stamped on the back, and everything we talked about. It's stamped
in gold, don't forget.
Yeah.
It's stamped in gold.
It's in gold.
And the best part about this bill, I've written many articles about this, is that it talks about overthrowing your government right above the 100 on the front.
I know.
It's part of the Declaration of Independence. It says you have the duty to overthrow your government when they get out of hand. And I can't think of another time in history that our government has been more out of hand.
You think, huh? What, with Obamacare blowing up and, out of control deficit spending, hundreds of military bases around the globe doing God knows what, individual rights falling by the wayside, and all of your phone calls, emails, faxes, and phone calls being bugged. You think they're out of hand, Bix?
Well, of course they're out of hand. The question I always ask is, are they doing it on purpose to teach the people of the world that freedom and liberty is important, and the nanny state cannot survive very long? And what is going on now I think a lot of it has to do with teaching the world what is wrong with, all these dictatorial and socialist types of programs. Everything's falling apart now, and it's a great lesson to be learned, but everything seems to be coming to a head, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's rather remarkable. And then, we go on to your friend there, Bart Chilton. He made an inglorious exit from the CFTC, didn't he?
He did. He kind of, they were voting on the position limits rule, and Bart's statement, basically about 3 or 4 sentences into it, says, "Oh, by the way, I handed in my resignation to the president." And some people will say, "Well, of course he was in with the bad guys," and I don't think so. I think he did more to kind of promote the idea that these bankers are bad than anybody else in our government. So I'm going to give Bart Chilton some kudos for at least bringing to the forefront something to discuss. Now, he wasn't able to shut it down, at least so far, but he did a lot to get the word out there, and he was on every television show known to man saying there are people manipulating the market. We are seeing that now, and it's coming out. So bravo to Bart. I don't think he's going to be hired by one of the banksters as a reward for what he did, like all other ex CFTC chairmen. They all go to the banks and get multi-billion-dollar bonuses for all the work they did for the bad guys when they were in office. I don't think Bart's going to go there. I don't think anybody would hand over money for helping destroy the banks.
Yeah, amazing. He seemed like a good guy. He seemed like somebody who really wanted to do something, and yet he was stymied at every turn because, look, let's face it, the CFTC does not get the best and the brightest in terms of staff, in terms of budget, and if they wanted the CFTC to have any power, they would have folded it into the SEC a long time ago, had a single regulator of all derivatives, stocks, all markets in the United States. It's by design that the CFTC is this regulatory backwater, and they were never going to allow them to effectively bring the government down, were they?
Well, that's exactly it. They were set up in the 70s to run cover for the manipulation of gold and silver mainly, and oil, the oil rigging. So, yeah, I don't think the SEC and the CFTC should merge. It's like merging two evil animals. The SEC is just as bad as the CFTC. But on another note, if you look at where the CFTC is now versus where they were, in 2000 and in the 90s, there's an obvious push towards at least discussing the issues, which is good. Do they want to be the one to take down the banking system and destroy everybody's wealth, which is what would happen if they charge J.P. Morgan with rigging the silver market? The implications of that is everybody would lose everything. All the banks would go down because of the derivative meltdown. Everybody would lose their 401k. Do we really want the CFTC blamed for that, or should we wait until the banks implode themselves so the blame gets put on the right people?
Yeah, and that's what it really comes down to. I guess it's all coming down to a question of timing, isn't it? Isn't it, Bix?
It is, and today they started the nationwide grid exercises and drills. If the grid goes down, the electrical grid goes down, what would happen? Running a nationwide test like this is huge, because not just on the grid side, which is very kind of tenuous when you talk about electricity and our need for electricity these days, but you also need the banking system to be continually running for the grid to stay up. And I think that's part of why they're doing this grid test now, is they know very soon these banks are going to go down, and once that happens, commerce will kind of stop in its tracks as we figure out who owns what and what we're going to do about it. So I think it's very timely that this grid test is going on today and tomorrow.
Now, interesting. If we go back in history to the birth of electrical power in the United States, guess who owned it?
Yeah. Wasn't it? Well, who was it? It was Watson and
Well,
and
J.P. Morgan through General Electric, and then Con Edison. Do we know who owns Con Edison and the Edison companies? I think a large family that was rather prominent in oil, and still is to this day.
Rockefellers.
Yeah, right. So it all gets kind of
goes
interesting.
Back to, that goes back to Edison and, AC versus DC power, and
Tesla.
Tesla had the answer. It was free energy, and they shut them down. If you go back in history, there's amazing things that happened at the turn of the century.
Yeah, there was a special, I think, on the History Channel that if you have a chance to, you really want to check it out. The Men Who Built America, and it was a three-way competition between Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Morgan, and at least around the turn of the century, Morgan was the temporary victor because he basically got rid of Carnegie through buying him out, U.S. Steel, and then through General Electric. But then the oil industry, kind of became primacy. Became the industry in the world. It's the number one industry now. And you could argue that banking is, but the Rockefellers really came to dominate banking as well through Chase Manhattan Bank, which then merged with. Eventually, they became one and the same. But up till World War II, they were arch competitors. And then after World War II, according to the Rothbardian history, financial history of the world, the Morgans became the Rockefellers' junior partners. And I don't want to get into the whole world financial disorder because, you know what that'll do for you. Nothing, but you know what I'm saying.
And your listeners should go back and read all that's has been written about that time, because there were a lot of things done that basically shaped where we are today, and a lot of things covered up and hidden, especially on the energy side. The dollar now, they say it's unbacked, but there was a plan to make it a oil-backed dollar.
Yeah.
And you look at it, the largest need for the U.S. dollar is in oil transactions. So that's why the U.S. demands that everybody buy their oil in U.S. dollars, and that's falling apart now. So all those dollars are not going to be needed.
Exactly, and that's going to lead to, as you said, the collapse of the dollar, and it's coming. It's coming pretty soon, and we're going to talk more about that up next on the FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com, 1230 WBZT.
Hi, it's Kerry Lutz. I recently decided to move my retirement account into physical precious metals to hedge against the coming times. If you want to move an existing retirement account into physical precious metals that you can hold in your hand, tax-free, there's no company that can do it more quickly and efficiently than Regal Assets. It took them just 24 hours to open my new IRA account, and all I had to do was fill out one simple form. The best part is that Regal Assets does all the work for you. They cover the setup and administrative costs for 2013. If you're interested in making the same move I did, call 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620. That's 855-678-6620, or visit them at regalassets.com. You'll be glad you did, and tell them Kerry sent you.
We're back on the FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com with the one and only Bix Weir, roadtorooted.com, and Bix. So a couple of other issues here. I'm amazed to find out that there is manipulation on the foreign currency markets. I mean, who would have ever thought that? Weren't you shocked?
It's amazing. What a shocker. It's amazing that every single market is rigged except gold and silver.
It's good to know there's honest markets, right?
Yeah, that announcement, it's always been, it's been rumored for a while, but as of, I think it was yesterday in FT, they had a big article that the regulators are coming down on these banks that rig the foreign exchange markets. And the banks aren't even saying we're not doing it. They're saying we want leniency. If you read that article in FT, it says every bank is saying we need leniency to keep the system going. Of course they rigged the dollar. Why do you think it stood as an unbacked currency since 1971? You had to rig the dollar. You had to rig the gold markets, the silver markets, the oil markets, practically all markets with computers and derivatives. That's how it's done. So although it's no surprise to people who are kind of in the know, it is a surprise that now is the time that they're going to shut down the rigging of the foreign exchange markets. And if they actually do this, you're going to see all foreign exchange markets go wonky, because you have to have market rigging if you're going to run an unbacked currency.
Yeah, and that is a little bit frightening to everybody who has a lot of unbacked currency in your bank account or in your pocket, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the end game for not controlling the price of gold and silver and controlling the dollar exchange rate and the euro exchange rate, the end game for all that is an implosion of the derivative market, the multi-quadrillion dollar market, and the largest banks are basically the backstop for that. And if we lose J.P. Morgan, Chase, Goldman Sachs, HSBC, Deutsche Bank, you can kiss every single electronic and paper asset goodbye, because that's what they're trying to avoid. The too big to fail scenario, and nobody talks about what are the consequences of failure in the too big to fail bank. That's where we are, and it has to be done at some point. Everybody's just afraid to press that button that says, okay, let's reset everything, and because there will be chaos, and there will be, if your power goes down because no one goes to work because there's no money to be paid, it's kind of is all fitting together now as a time when it is time to take these bankers out, and it should be really interesting between now and the end of the year how far we get.
Yeah, you think we're that close?
Yeah, I do. I've been thinking we're close for a long time. They put it off in 2009. I sent out an article that basically said they're going to try to put off the crash for as long as possible. And it's been, 5 years since the 2008 issues. So it's kind of like, okay, are we done with this putting it off? Are we gonna let the system crash now, and so we can get back to a normal state of being in our monetary system and take all these bankers out and all these criminals? Really, they are criminals that rig the markets. And there's a whistleblower that said they even skim off the top of every single trade. They get their computer right next to the exchange, and before you place your trade, they're going to take some money out of your account, buy and sell with you, and then give you, the remainder. So there's a markup on every single transaction. It's basically stealing money from you. And this computer guy proved that that's what is being done. He gave his evidence to the SEC, and the SEC has sat on it for a couple of years now. So it's all falling apart, and it'll be really interesting going forward.
Yeah, and you wonder how much longer it could just go on, because, it's like the ship taking on water, and you got a crew there with pails trying to bail it out. There's no pumps, and, it's this massive effort with, one guy handing the pail to the next, to the next, to the next, and then boom, off the side, and the next, and it's like, hey, how long is that going to work for?
Exactly. It's, really, it works for as long as we want it to work. This is being kind of run by the U.S. now, and the U.S. is the largest debtor nation. We would benefit the most if there was a currency collapse, because we sucked out all the benefits already. We built our houses and our roads and our infrastructure and our military. Now the best thing for the U.S. to do is to collapse the system and start fresh. And that's what the Fed, Boston, is saying in all the publications that I analyze. That's exactly what they want to do. Crash the system, go back to a sound form of money in gold and silver and, maybe other currencies too, because Boston wasn't sure that gold and silver would even be accepted after the crash. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, a little freaky though. A little freaky to think that it can happen that quickly. And my God, what will be left? What will be left standing? And
all the hard assets that people have in their possession, that That will be left standing. The U.S. has a plan. You know, I talk about this a lot. Has a plan to go back on a gold and silver standard. You know, they've had a plan since the late 60s. So it has been that long since this operation has been going on. I believe we're near the end. But, you know, looking back, you know, when will we say is the end? The end started in 2008 with when the banks froze up, really. And it's just the end hasn't completely finished, obviously. So, you know, we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks and months.
Yeah, it's not like a movie there where at the end it says the end. You know, there's nobody, not going to be anybody there with a sign saying, all right, the end, next movie begins.
The bubbles are bigger now than they were in 2008. So, you know, yes, they rigged the stock market, so nobody really thinks there's anything wrong, but the very moment that this manipulation stops is the moment that everything falls down. Yep,
that's it. Well, Bix, always a pleasure. So we find you at roadtorooted.com.
That's it. And check in every once in a while, and I'll try to keep people informed on at least what I see going on.
Oh, hey, one more thing. That former Fed official, Husser was his name, is on an apology tour for QE, which was rather interesting. He was on CNBC's Fast Money, and he said he believed at the time it was just one more tool that the Fed introduced to try to help the economy, but ultimately, very quickly it became obvious that it wasn't working in the way it was supposed to. It was just reinforcing and giving the banks profits and not helping Main Street in the least. So that was interesting that the guy just came out and said, you know, Captain Obvious, right?
It is very interesting, and it's not allowed by the Fed to talk about anything like that, but unless there's another agenda going on, which I believe there is. I believe that the Fed and the U.S. Congress is trying to destroy the system, the U.S. dollar. All they're doing, everything they do, is to shake the confidence in the U.S. dollar so that we can end the game that seems to have no end and go back to a sound monetary system. I believe he was told to say that by the Fed in order to shake the confidence in the Fed. So it's all shaken right now, and in any unbacked fiat system, it's all about confidence. And the Congress and the Fed are doing everything to shake that confidence.
Well, they're doing a fine job, and as we say in a fiat-based system, confidence is the mother's milk of a fiat-based currency, and once you lose it, you really can't get it back, can you?
You can't. I mean, it hasn't been lost totally. It's been lost, you know, with our crowd and everybody probably listening to this interview. But you know, the mainstream Joe, all they're thinking is, I'm mad at the bankers. They're getting all the money. I have nothing. I'm starving. And what am I going to do? So that's kind of where we are. And if we do see a crash in the next few weeks or months, hopefully it'll be quick, like pulling a Band-Aid. But you know, if it goes like it did in 2008, it might take even longer.
Exactly. All right. Thanks a lot, Bix. Always a pleasure. We'll talk with you again real soon. You be well.
You too, Kerry.
Hey, if you're a coffee connoisseur like me, you need to try an amazing new roaster out of L.A., Tonks Coffee. These guys are fanatical about delivering the best beans in the world. They source directly from the growers, roast it, and ship it to you within 24 hours, so it's the most fresh coffee you've ever tasted. Every 2 weeks, you get a new batch of incredible beans roasted to perfection. If you're hitting a cafe most mornings, this is a much better and more economical way to get great coffee. Tonks is by subscription only, and they're offering you a free sample. Use the URL tonks.org/liberty. That's TONX.org/liberty. Get some for yourself or send it to someone you know who appreciates the finer things. Tonks.org/liberty. Again, TONX.org/liberty.
The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Financial Survival Network.